The Reverend Dr. Randy Partain is a fellowshipped minister with the Unitarian Universalist Association, serving Tapestry Unitarian Universalist Church in Spring. His primary focus this year has been deepening community connection through nurturing spiritual development and vibrant small group ministry. Randy also works as a spiritual director, primarily serving clients who are non-religious or spiritually independent. He passionately defines ministry as inviting people into a deeper relationship with themselves, deeper connection with others, and deeper awareness of the world we all share. So we're so privileged and happy to present to all of us and to listen to Reverend Dr. Randy Partain.
Thank you, Cheryl. It's kind of a special conversation today. Hopefully we've all had a moment to settle and take a breath after the excitement this morning. We have some more welcome excitement ahead of us in terms of being able to move out of a strictly virtual connection with one another and being able to move into a post-pandemic reality. And that can be a little anxious too, even though it might be something we're really excited about. There's so much to think about, so many decisions to make when it comes to what happens next. And so that's one of the reasons that we have engaged in some conversations as part of an appreciative inquiry process. And for those of you that were not part of our small group conversations, I just want to give you a little bit of context for that. And then I want to share with you some of what we learned from those conversations and what that might mean for the next chapter in the fellowship's journey. So I'll share my screen with you and just let you see a bit about what appreciative inquiry involves. A lot of times when people think about how to plan for the future or what to do next, they like to think about what's broken that we need to fix, what's going wrong that we need to address. Appreciative inquiry takes a different kind of approach, and it basically says, what have we done well? Let's focus on the things that are going well for us. Let's focus on the things that we know how to do really well. And let's create a reality that carries forward the great things from the past and creates a future that's based on the things that we're passionate about. We can still value our differences. We can still think about how we are in relationship with people who have different priorities than we have. But we can also ask questions that guide us toward a future together that ignites our passions and that helps us to frame things in a meaningful way. So these are kind of the premises for the conversations that we had. Welcoming multiple realities and using language that evokes what we want to create. And appreciative inquiry is a whole process. We started at the board level talking about what do we want to explore, and that affirmative topic was how are we going to thrive as we cross over the threshold into a post-pandemic reality. And so all of our conversations with our small groups were part of this little discovery phase where we are appreciating the best of what is. We're sharing stories with one another, and we're basically just gathering the themes of the community, which is what I want to share with you in just a moment. What happens next for the fellowship is that together as a community, you can use those themes to dream what can be. You can have conversations and imagine possibilities that emerge from those themes, and then get specific about designing that and say, okay, if we get down to what are the details about how we're going to do this, how does that get designed? And then you move forward into that, you create that vision, and then you do it again. And this is an ongoing process of continually examining what you do well, examining what values emerge from your relationship with one another, and creating the next steps, creating the next future out of that appreciative sense of what you do well, a positive core at the center of everything. So this is what emerged from our small group conversations with the fellowship. We had 6 conversations, 38 participants were a part of those conversations, and we met for a total of 8 hours, although each person was probably around for maybe an hour and a half of those. And we focused on one small piece of the fellowship's mission, which is, it is our purpose to be a visible, enduring, liberal religious presence in our community. And we believe this can be accomplished through creative worship, religious education, intellectual stimulation, supportive fellowship, and community service. And so looking at that, in our small group conversations, we asked, when have you felt most deeply connected and involved with fulfilling that part of the congregation's mission? And then we asked people, without being humble, what did they do that contributed to that experience, and what was present around them? What were the realities of the environment, of the culture of the fellowship that made that feeling of deep connection possible? And here's what we heard from folks. A lot of people immediately had a sense of feeling welcome and accepted. They had a sense that there was mutual care and respect that was just embedded in the culture of the fellowship. People talked about finding ways to be meaningfully involved. So finding ways that individually inspired them, that spoke to their individual capabilities, and just being useful to the fellowship. That's a great way that a lot of folks found a sense of belonging. And there's a casual atmosphere. We can do things like have a Zoom meeting that doesn't go the way we want it to, and start a little bit late, and people are still here, and only a couple of people have said, I'm not going to be able to stick around because I've got something going on. We make time, and we are casual in the way that we relate in worship to one another. And it's a co-created service. It's something that people feel a sense of ownership about. A lot of people also mentioned, in terms of what happens outside of the fellowship, the MLK parade, where you pass out children's books to the people along the parade route. And that is something that we're going to see can be built upon in the future if you want to. The small groups that you have within the fellowship create a really strong sense of belonging. That's a powerful way that people have a sense that they know one another. And the affirmation that we recited a little earlier, you say that every week, and it's a good reminder that you have this identity and this commitment to one another. People walk their talk. That was said over and over again in these conversations. The Empty Bowls ministry is also another thing that brings a lot of the congregation together for one purpose, and people do different parts of that task, but it brings a lot of people together, and it's really meaningful to a lot of folks. But beyond that, your opportunities to share meals with each other are a huge way that people feel a sense of belonging. A lot of times when people in different congregations have potlucks, they'll gather in their little cliques with their close friends, and they'll sit at the table together, and there's not really a lot of room for newcomers. And people said over and over again in these small group conversations that we had, that people make space at the fellowship for others. And so if you're sitting there at a potluck looking around for a seat, there's going to be someone that motions you over and creates space for you. And that was a lot of people's experience, was that when you share meals together, you have a really strong sense of community. The joys and concerns that you share together also are a way that people feel like they know one another really well. They know the people that they're in community with, and it gives them a glimpse at what matters to folks. And then there were a lot of other things that fewer people mentioned, but that were still powerful. The attic treasures, I guess that's kind of a garage sale. Somebody said it was a junk sale, and some of it was really valuable junk and some of it was less valuable junk. But the idea of a community coming together and working on that project, it almost doesn't matter how much money you make from it, because what people get from that is this rich sense of collaboration and belonging. And those kinds of projects are the things that we want to look for in moving forward, because you know how to do that well, and you know how to invite people into that space of collaboration. And one of the surprising things was that being over Zoom for the past year has brought people closer together too. They have felt like they've gotten to know people, and they've been more connected with folks than they expected to be over Zoom. There are a couple of other things I'm going to mention as we go into the results and the themes. And also the board has a copy of this report. If there's something that you want to follow up with or ask questions about, they have a copy of this too. So you'll be able to have a conversation with them. The idea of community presence came up a lot. And overall, it's a sense that when you reach out beyond your walls, you're serving others. You're not doing it to proselytize. You're not doing it because you're trying to gain members. You're reaching out into the community because you're living your values. You're walking your talk. You're doing the things that have integrity with your Unitarian Universalist values. And so the themes that emerged from those kinds of responses were that you're connected both with one another and with the community beyond your walls, that you have a sense of acceptance of one another and acceptance of people in the community around you, and that you act with integrity. You're people who do what you say you're going to do. You have these values and you live them out. When it comes to your identity, a lot of people at the fellowship were introduced by a current member or somebody who used to be a member. And so I want to highlight that it's important for folks to be engaged in other organizations where you keep coming across like-minded individuals. A lot of the time, the people that find the fellowship find it because you're engaged in some other activity or some other group that both of you really care about. And you say, oh, you should come check out my church. We do this kind of thing all the time. And people get introduced that way. So I want to encourage you all to continue being involved in other organizations outside of the fellowship, because that's one of the ways that you extend your reach and are able to do more in the community with partnership with other folks that have similar values. I also want to really lift up the newspaper ad on Wednesdays. I don't think Madeline knew that this had the impact that it has had, but a few people mentioned that they still look back at that ad and draw encouragement and inspiration from it. And some people have discovered the fellowship because of that Wednesday newspaper ad. You might think that an ad in the newspaper doesn't do a whole lot, but it turns out that that is an important way that people are exposed to the fellowship. And also just a reality check about the fellowship's identity. It is a predominantly white, progressive community. That's not a judgment, that's just a statement of fact. So when people walk through the door, when people get engaged with activities at the fellowship, that's what they're going to see. You can embrace that, you can say that's who we are. You can say we want to be more diverse. If you have an intention about being a more diverse, multicultural community, though, it means that you have to be intentional about the steps that you're going to take to become more multicultural. Right now, it's very organic. You're very like-minded and you attract people who think like you think. And so a lot of you have come to the fellowship because you wanted a place where it felt safe to be among like-minded individuals, and it has just become the community that it is organically. And that's a great thing. That's a positive thing. That's a thing to celebrate. And it's also a thing to think about, are there ways that we want to be more intentional about how we welcome people that may not be white and progressive, because they are going to have a little more challenge feeling like they are part of the community. But overall, a sense of being engaged, like-minded, having an organic sense of welcome was prevalent themes in our small group conversations. Internally, that sense of organic connection is a part of how you do things in relationship with one another. You help each other out because you care about the same things. Things work because you help each other out. Sometimes, though, getting involved means taking a personal risk to step forward, because things are very casual at the fellowship and things are kind of individualistic. So you might not be asked to step up and do something because people are just letting things happen the way that they happen. It all works out because people help each other. And so if there's something you care about, if there's something you want to do, you may need to take a little initiative and take a little risk and step up and say, hey, I want to be involved in this. How do I do more in this area of ministry? How do I take a step toward leadership? Because people might not know that you want to do that. Sometimes you need to know who to talk to to be introduced to other ministries in the congregation, because things happen so casually. Sometimes there's some assumptions about institutional knowledge. So what I take away from that is, don't be afraid to ask. It's not that people are ignoring you. It's not that people don't want you to be involved. It's just that there's this casual family kind of atmosphere. It's a very organic way of doing things. And sometimes there aren't structures in place that say, we want to reach out and invite these people to do different areas of leadership. You have to step up and take a little bit of initiative. But it's a very caring community at the same time. So once you step up and you say, I want to do this thing, people have reported over and over again how much support they have felt for the things that they were doing as part of the fellowship. So I want to bring that up both as a positive thing, and also as just something to be aware of, that there might need to be some individual initiative to take the level of involvement that you want in the community. There was also a sense that what happens within the community depends on the personality of the different leaders. So this is something to think about, even when you're considering who your next board members are going to be, or who the other leadership in the congregation might be. People have a sense that their individual preferences, their individual passions inform their leadership. And so that determines, at different points in time, that has determined whether the fellowship was more of a social place or more of a social justice place. And so individual preferences matter. And that's a good thing too. But it means that you want to let people in leadership know what matters to you, so that the fellowship can continue to be the community that you want it to be. So here are the opportunities that rose up from this, the things that you do well that you can continue doing because they are excellent things that keep you bound together as a community, and that also keep you doing healthy things outside of the fellowship. Keep eating together. I know you can't do it very much right now, but as you're thinking about moving beyond that threshold, more and more people are getting vaccinated. It's going to be safe for people to gather in small groups if everyone there is vaccinated. It's going to be safer to gather in groups in person more and more over the coming months. So keep finding ways to eat together, because when you do that, you make intentional space for newcomers, and you also deepen your bonds with one another. And it's something you do well, and it's something you do naturally. So keep that up for sure. A lot of congregations struggle with the idea of joys and concerns on Sunday morning, because sometimes it can take a bit of time. And sometimes individuals can use the joys and concerns time for a soapbox and to start giving their opinions about a whole variety of things. But you all do joys and concerns really well. And what it does for the community is it gives people a sense of connection with each other. And it gives you a sense of empathy and compassion that you might not have if you were just sitting in chairs and lighting candles with a phrase or something spoken about somebody next to you in the congregation. Hearing from people's hearts what matters to them, what they're concerned about, or what they're celebrating, is a really important way that your community is bound together and has a deep sense of connection. Your small groups do the same thing. So when you gather together in small groups, you create space for people's opinions. You naturally create space for people to have different ways of seeing things without it needing to be a competition, without it being right and wrong. And in the small groups that you have created, whether it's poker night, or whether it's a craft, or whether it's adult RE, all of those different small group opportunities are things that people feel a deep sense of connection with one another, and that they're going to want to stick around in this community and keep doing things together. And then you also have some outreach things, some things that reach out beyond the walls of the fellowship that make a big difference in the community, and also connect a lot of people within the congregation. Like I mentioned, the empty bowls, the MLK parade, those things involve a lot of people in the congregation, and they help you be more visible to people in Galveston and say, this is who these people are, this is what they care about. We can count on them to show up because they have integrity and they walk their talk. Those things should be at the top of your priority list when you think about what things to plan for as you move forward from pandemic times. There are also some things to think about in terms of casting vision, things that you may not be as ingrained in your culture, in your DNA, but that you might be able to take advantage of in moving forward because you already have the beginnings of these steps. And these are not things that I'm saying you absolutely must do these things or even that you should do them, but they came up in the conversations. And so I want to make you aware of them. First of all, as I mentioned, Zoom has created a more intimate sense of connection with people. Maybe it's because of the way that we have to listen a little more carefully over Zoom. Maybe it's because of the way that that we have a little sense of being focused on the person who's talking. But thinking about how to carry that forward and continue to do some things virtually might be a really powerful way of maintaining intimate connection within the congregation. It's also a really easy access point for people who aren't familiar with the fellowship. If you're doing some kind of a book study and somebody doesn't have to show up to a room full of strangers, but can just log into a virtual meeting place, for some people, that's a lot lower risk to cross that threshold and say, I'm going to join in this book study about white fragility or something along those lines and join in this Zoom conversation. So what kinds of hybrid in-person and virtual activities can you do moving forward since you're getting so adept at doing virtual stuff? Another thing you might want to think about is how can you be more intentional and clear with your internal communications so that people don't have to wonder so much about who to talk to get involved with different ministries, so that people know where there are areas of need that they might step into a little more clearly, so that there's no question about what's going on with different ministries within the church. Having a casual and organic relationship with one another can be really satisfying, and it might be what you want to cultivate. You might like things just the way they are. But there also might be some ways that you can be more intentional and clear in your communication with one another that help people find a deeper sense of belonging and satisfaction within the fellowship. Something to think about. One of the things that you did in the past that really drew the whole congregation together was you did your welcoming congregation certification many years ago. And that was something that the entire congregation was involved in that conversation. And it helped people feel connected, and it helped people feel like their voice mattered, and it helped people feel like they had a say in the direction that the congregation was going to take. So they had some ownership over the fellowship. Maybe exploring the 8th principle would be a next step toward that. There's also a widening the circle report that would be another way that you could potentially involve the entire congregation in conversations about the direction that the fellowship might take. But the 8th principle intersects with some of the things you're already doing in the community. It intersects with how you connect with the Black Lives Matter movement. It intersects with how you might connect with the Galveston Urban Ministries. And it intersects with what your identity is as a predominantly white progressive community right now. So it might be interesting to consider exploring the 8th principle of Unitarian Universalism, which is a proposed principle. It's not an official thing that the UUA has adopted yet, but a lot of congregations are exploring it right now. And that could involve everyone in some level of exploration about what that means for the Galveston Fellowship. And as I mentioned, you already have some relationships with organizations outside of the fellowship. Thinking about how to expand on those relationships that already exist can be a really powerful way to walk your talk even more in the community. You already have a connection with Galveston Urban Ministries. Starting a conversation that says, what more can we do as a community to be in partnership with you? Talking to the folks that are a part of the local Black Lives Matter movement and saying, we do this thing with a parade every year. What more can we do? How else can we be involved so that we're able to live our principles in a way that makes a difference to you? and other people in the Galveston community. Those relationships that you've already started to build are going to be really powerful ways to extend your reach into the community and do amazing things based on your principles. There are other churches in Galveston that are caring for different things. They have different kinds of focused ways of caring for other individuals. Like there's a church very close to you that has a really strong focus on caring for people that don't have homes. And so they make that a big deal about their ministry. It's possible that Galveston has another area that the fellowship might say, this is going to be our thing. This is going to be what defines our outreach into the community. Maybe you're already doing it. Maybe it's the empty bowls and it's the parade and that's it. But if you want to cast vision for deeper involvement, there are some relationships that you've already started building that you can maximize and ask, what more can we do? So again, this has all been about the discovery part of this cycle. And what you get to do next is dream together, not just, sit on your back porch and think about what might be possible, or your front porch, or wherever you happen to sit when you think about things, but talk to each other, dream together, think about, what might we need to do now so that when we move into a less strictly virtual relationship with one another, that we can really hit the ground running. And be in conversation with your board about that, because they are going to want to represent the congregation in the decisions that they make. And as you are dreaming this together, you'll be able to start designing something that has some real clear action steps that you can take. And you can rely on your regional UUA staff to help with that if you want to, because they have a lot of skill and a lot of experience with helping congregations identify the specific actions that they need to take in order to move in a visionary direction. And then once you've dreamed and once you've designed, you get to create it. You get to live into that future that you're envisioning with one another. And then you get to do it all over again, if you like the appreciative inquiry approach. So I have really loved the small group conversations that I've gotten to have. I've gotten to know a lot of you a little more deeply, and I've gotten to know what you're passionate about. And the thing that was amazing was how all of these conversations, the same themes rose to the top. It was really evident that at least the people who participated in these conversations care about the same things. Sometimes there are fellowships that have different groups that have different passions, and you'll have a group over here that really cares about one thing and they feel like they've got to defend that territory, and you'll have another group over here that cares about something else and they feel like they have to compete for time and energy. And you all don't do that. You have a really strong sense of, here's what we collectively value, and that's incredible. And you may not realize that. You may not realize that it's unique, but that is something to celebrate, and that's something to maximize as you move forward. I just want to reiterate something that I said a few minutes ago at the beginning of this talk, which is it's going to be anxious moving from doing things virtually to doing things more in person. There are a lot of decisions to make, and even though it's an exciting threshold to cross, it's going to be very natural for stress to be higher than you expect, for things to maybe tick you off that ordinarily wouldn't, for people to be a little more raw. Be graceful with one another as you continue on this journey, and be graceful with yourselves, because it's very, very natural for your anxiety to be a little spiked right now. And as you move forward, if you're graceful with yourself and one another, you'll be able to envision what comes next in a way that has a lot of vibrance and vitality to it, and it really expresses the core of who you are as a community in the larger world around you. And that's how you're going to keep creating wholeness and well-being, just like you have in years past. Thank you so much for letting me be a part of this process. I hope it's been meaningful to you, and I'll stick around after the service to answer any questions that you might have that I didn't cover here, and to let you maybe engage a little more deeply with one another. So thank you very much, and it's been a pleasure.